Welcome, my friends, to the Beggars and Brawlers podcast. This is episode 55, recorded Friday, the 16th of September, 2022, and I am back at home in my little audio studio. Hopefully it sounds better and cleaner than the stuff I recorded this summer did. And today I've got some surprising results for you from our survey last time, plus a little bit on what they mean for the books I'm going to be writing in this next writing season, and my cold-hearted plan to sell my soul to capitalism. So let's talk about the survey first. You might remember last time I was talking about how I'd had this experience of going back and reading the Empire of Resonance series, or really just the beginning of book 4, and being surprised at how much I liked it, because I generally look down and don't think much of the things I've written in the past. And also in looking through the reviews, seeing how many people are angry that that book doesn't really bring the series to a resounding conclusion, even though it concludes the book itself very well. And how I'd always planned to write a book 5 and just lost interest for various reasons. So I'd been thinking about that, and also thinking about this writing season coming up. I'm done with Fruit, so I don't have to work that job again until June. So this period, basically October through May, is a time when I can get a lot of writing done. And so it's always kind of wonderful to have this time in front of me and be like, okay, so what stories do I want to do? What series do I want to work on? Like, what are my goals? And so the question came up of like, should I write book 5 or not? But alongside it was the question of, well, I am definitely going to write the last book in this arc of the Tidecaller Chronicles, book 4. And I could totally jump into book 5. I'd be fresh and ready to go. No extra world building required. And then I have these things floating over my head, like the Dragon Bard series that we had been serializing here last summer. I really love that story. I've got most of it plotted out, and I want to keep writing it. And then I've got a few unfinished projects from before, and lots of new stuff that I just kind of have as nebulous ideas that I'd love to, start world building for and create new worlds and new stories and new people. The allure of the shiny new thing is always there. And it's definitely more alluring than picking up the slightly dull and rusted old thing that might be the Empire of Resonance. But that's the weird thing about books, is that to me, it feels dull and rusted, and everybody who picks it up, to them it's fresh and shiny and new, and hopefully it doesn't suck. I mean, that's part of what we were talking about last time, is there's been so many reviews and so many good reviews that I guess I have to conclude, despite my own judgments of my previous works, that those books don't suck. And so they're still shiny and new for people who read them. And so I kind of deserve to give those people who've read everything, and for the people who are going to read them still, who think that they're getting a complete series when they buy that box set and feel kind of disappointed by that last book, I kind of owe them a book. So anyways, that's where I was, but I'm totally happy to write something else too. And then the results of the survey came back. I had 45 respondents across newsletter and podcast, and I forget where else, but lots of people responded. And just 7% of people said that they wanted me to write the next Tidecaller book. Hopefully that doesn't mean that they're not excited for the next 2 books in the current series to come out. So book 1 and 2 have been out forever. I didn't release a book last year, which kind of guts me, or I guess this year. But last writing season for me, I was just working on Tidecaller book 3 the entire time, which is kind of awful, and I want to do better this year. But there were reasons. But yeah, in terms of book 5, which would start the next arc, only 7% of people said that's the one you should write. They could only choose one option, so only 7% chose that. And then the Dragon Bard was 9%, so basically same amount of people were interested in reading the full novel of that story that I'd started serializing. And that doesn't surprise me, because it's been a year and it's hard to read things in serial format anyway. I do think it's a really strong story. Then there was the option Surprise Me, which I put in kind of as the catch-all for all of these other projects like Ruin Blessed and some of these other things that I've sketched out that I really want to write, but that are more nebulous and don't have any words on the page, for people who wanted that. And 24% of people said, yeah, Surprise Me, which is cool. And it was kind of interesting to see that my longer-term subscribers to the newsletter and the podcast, the people who I think have read a lot of books and are here because they like me versus have just liked a book, they were less on the surprise me side. And it was more the newer people who've come to me in the last few months or maybe the last year and haven't read everything who are kind of more like surprise me. So, I mean, I have to take into account that there are lots of people who probably don't even know what the Dragon Bard is because they weren't listening last year. So anyway, 7, 9, 24%. Book 5 in the Empire of Resonance, 60%. I did not see that coming. Way over half of people and so much more, almost 3 times more than the next most populated response is write the damn last book in this series. So I really didn't see that coming, but that feels like a pretty strong response to me in terms of what am I supposed to do with my writing life? And it does feel good. The more that I've thought about it and the things that I talked about before about people not really getting an ending to the series and how there'd always been one planned and how much it's getting read, I think it makes a lot of sense to write it. So this is me announcing to the world that that book is coming. And if I'm cool and I write quickly and do all the things that I think I should, hopefully it'll come next year. I've got to write book 4 in the Tidecaller Chronicles first, so that's going to be this year and probably a little bit into 2023. And then hopefully the gates will be wide open for me to write Empire of Resonance book 5. Last book in the Empire of Resonance series, even though at one time I was thinking of that as like a 10-book series or something. And I do have that other series, Ruin Blessed, which is secretly a spin-off happening in the same world on a different continent. With a slightly different magic system, but would ultimately connect in powerful and cool ways. But that one is a little bit more on the back burner. So anyways, for the time being, this one that's been all the way off the back burner and just cold in the fridge, like I need to throw it out, is now going to get put back on the burner. And it's going to be interesting to turn that fire up because it's been so long since I wrote these books. I mean, reading the beginning of book 4 was really interesting to me just in like, oh yeah, I kind of remember writing this. And oh yeah, that character. Because it's so far out of my head because I've worked on so many projects since then. So I think I'm going to have to go back and read all of them. And that'll be a really interesting process. And I'm going to have to hold back so hard from editing and changing things because I am a different writer than I was in 2018 when I wrote that first book. It doesn't sound like that long ago, but it's actually feels like a long time for me in terms of being a writer. So I'm going to have to hold back. But anyways, that'll be an interesting process. And not to delve too deeply into my thoughts on that, the main takeaway here is I've got 8 wonderful writing months ahead of me, and I want to spend half of them writing you another Empire of Resonance book to bring back Ty and Ella. Ty was doing some stuff in the background of book 4 in the beginning, and then he just disappeared and never came back. So we're going to see what he was doing. And there's a last chapter to book 4 that got deleted to make the book feel complete in a way that it actually wasn't. So that chapter is going to come back. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be fun. And thank you for responding to the survey and letting me know what you thought, because if you hadn't, I probably would not be doing this. I don't know what I would do if I was just following my artistic whims, but this honestly for me is not just an artistic whim thing. I'm writing to be read and partially to make money. So I want to write the thing that people want to buy, but mostly I want to write the stories that people want to read, not necessarily just the stories that I want to write, because I don't feel like it's done when I write the end. I feel like it's done when a review shows up online or someone talks to me in person, and then I'm like, the circle is complete because I wrote it and somebody read it, So I want to write the book that you want to read, plain and simple, basically. So those are the plans for this year, except there's one thing that I need to do first. And this is a thing that has been on the back burner for at least 2 years. It's a thing that I invested in. I think I spent like $800 on this thing back in 2020. A thing that has felt so crucial and important to my writing in an even bigger way than like writing the best book that I can, etc. And a thing that I have been very loath to do. And that would be marketing. I love writing books. I don't really like selling them. It does not come naturally to me. The platforms that you use and the strategies that you use are things that you just got to study and practice. I don't think that there are many naturals at it. And if they are not me. This is actually the reason that I signed with a publisher 2 years back. is because I knew that they could market my things in a way that I could not. And they have. They've done a really good job. This is probably the reason that so many people want Empire of Resonance Book 5 is because so many more people have read that series that's under their control than have read my Tidecaller Chronicles, even though, and this might just be the bias if I've written it more recently, but even though I feel like that series is a stronger and better series overall. So I want to have those skills. I don't want to pay somebody else to do it or essentially pay them by giving them my brainchild babies and having them take the bulk of the profits from selling them. That feels bad. I want to take the bulk of the profits from this thing that I created. So I've known that for 2 years. I've known it for longer than 2 years. 2 years ago, I researched what is the best course I can take, found this big, exhaustive one that's very in-depth. It's 150 hours of study, and then you got to put that all into practice. And I bought into it, and then it just sat on my hard drive. And now, finally, I made a promise to myself last year. I was like, as soon as I finish book 3 of Tidecaller, I got to do this thing. And I didn't finish it before my writing time ended. Maybe it took me so long to write book 3 because I was just dreading starting marketing. But anyway, I have started. I have watched the first few videos. I have started to think about what are the ways that I can use the Facebook's AI to find me readers and find people to buy them. And it's not as bad as I thought. I won't call it good, but there's also a pressure I feel when I write of this fiction has to be good, and it's hard to be creative and it's very hard to be objective about it. When you're studying something, you can be pretty objective. I understood this or I didn't. I did the homework or I didn't. And you can kind of just passively intake information. That's a comfortable spot for me. I, went to college for a long time, went to grad school. I have often been a student and I like being a student. So in some ways, it's actually easier than writing, even if it's not the thing that I want to do long term. So I'll have more to tell you about that, and hopefully even better than me telling you about it. Hopefully suddenly you just start seeing my books appearing in places that you've never seen them before, and more people talking about them because I've done my job of marketing and more people are reading them. That's the ultimate goal. I mean, that's the reason for the season, my friends. So those are my plans. Survey aside, I got to learn marketing first. Then I'm writing you the last book in the Tidecaller Chronicles. Then I'm writing you the last book in the Empire of Resonance. So I guess this writing season for me is kind of like capping off, or like an epic conclusion kind of year. So maybe it is the time for me to read A Memory of Light. If you've been following along in my reading, I'd been on this epic quest to read the Wheel of Time series, and I only had one book left. And I love Brandon Sanderson, who finished the series, and it's going to be the epic conclusion. Everybody says he sticks the landing. So excited to read this book, and kept bouncing off of it hard during the summer. Just couldn't get into this thing because it felt so intense from the start. Since I've been home, I'm still reading the Cradle book I was when I left off, which is book 9. I've almost caught up with that series from being only, I think, on book 2 or 3 when I started this summer. I read a lot of Cradle. It was the summer of Cradle, and I don't regret it. It was great. But it's starting to feel a little bit less appropriate. I don't necessarily want something so fun and light and adventurous. So I might wander back to A Memory of Light because I think it's the right kind of book for me to read as I start to myself write these big epic conclusions to series. I like to read something that's kind of in the same vein as the thing that I'm writing, because there's always a little part of my brain that's analyzing how is this author doing this and what can I learn from them. So that might happen, but I'm finishing up Reaper, which is interesting and I have lots of thoughts about it, but I feel like this podcast has gone on long enough, so I won't expostulate on power creep and the different things you can do when you're getting to the end of the progress of a progression fantasy arc. Yeah, so I'll leave it at that. I did start to read another book. I just read a sample of Portal to Nova Roma, which is way out of sight of my normal reading interests, but it was really engaging. So if you have ever wanted to try out a Portal fantasy or a lit RPG light or kind of sci-fi in a fantasy setting, the main character is an AI. This book really caught me. So I might be telling you about that next time too. But anyways, for now, I need to use this precious time that I have in my studio at home to record Rebel of Riddle and Woe. I'm recording the audiobook. Most days, my writing time comes while I'm waiting for my kids to get done at school, which means I'm at a coffee shop, which definitely means I can't record an audible quality audiobook. Right now, I'm here in my deathly quiet, wonderful little dark studio, and there are no children around to interrupt me, and so it's audiobook time. So nice to talk to you as always. I hope that this podcast finds you well and in the company of good books. I hope to bring you some of my own sometime soon, but until then, read on, and I'll see you next time.
For more information on Levi Jacobs and his books, including the award-winning Tide Cholera Chronicles, visit www.levijacobs.com. Or for a free audiobook, only available to podcast listeners, go to www.levijacobs.com/free. Thanks for listening, and read on.